Sashita Youngblood was an Indian-born girl. Born in 1974, she had a very unfortunate start to life. She was born with a deformity, which was two thumbs on one hand. As a result of this, her parents had given her up for adoption because of the embarrassment. She was to spend the first 5 years of her life in the care system. That is until she was adopted by Swiss couple Jan and Martha Youngblood. It is said she was thriving through life after this. At school, she was a happy girl and set goals of being a beautician and hairdresser. She was given an opportunity in England at age 20, a place where she had wanted to go in order to study English and make new friends. She was offered a job with a couple in Kensworth to live with them and help care for their children. Her training was due to start on January 10th, 1995. Her first 6 weeks in England, she had only been for a night out once before, and made plans to go a second time. The couple she was staying with had given her strict instructions to call them if she couldn't get a taxi home, as they knew she would be leaving the club late. On January 8th, 1995, Sashita was dropped off to a nightclub in Dunstable, known as Ritzy. There, she had the unfortunate luck of crossing paths with a man named Darren Smith. He had appeared friendly and charming, and Sashita was seen laughing and dancing with Smith for some time. Around 1:15 a.m., they had left Ritzy's. It is alleged that Darren had told Sashita that he would get her home, using that as the pretense to get her to go with him in the first place. They set off on foot, and Darren had walked the young girl to a playing field behind the Go Bowling Alley, known as GX Super Bowl, back in 1995, where he made sexual advances towards her, but she rejected them. He walked her further down and out of sight. Smith then unleashed his attack on her, punching, kicking, and stomping on the young woman repeatedly until she was unconscious. He dragged her unconscious around 75 yards, further in the dark, in case anyone had heard her scream. He also attempted to strangle her with her own tights, then proceeded to beat her again, so severely that her skull had left a dent in the floor, and her blood was sprayed on the wall of the bowling alley building. Darren had then sexually assaulted her. He ejaculated on her unconscious body, although I believe he thought she was dead at this point, which I would say makes it more horrific. He had then run off and flagged down a taxi, which took him home to the Marsh Farm area of Luton. Smith had lied to his sister when he got home and said the bloodstains on his clothes were because he got into a fight outside the club. The life of a 20-year-old girl was cut short in the most horrific circumstances, but it does get worse. It turns out a group of young boys were outside the bowling alley and they heard Sashita scream from around the back. They had initially thought to go and check it out, but they didn't hear her scream again, and they decided not to. If they had, she would probably still be alive today. I won't reveal the witness's name, but he has spoken of how it haunts him to this day. Sashita's half-naked body was discovered under a tree the next morning by employees of the leisure centre that were setting up for a football match. Police arrived on scene and blocked off the area for the forensics team, as Sashita would have been pronounced dead at the scene. They had gathered samples of Sashita's blood, but they also found semen on her body, and they also found scratches indicating that she had in fact fought for her life. Marks around her neck suggested that she had died as a result of strangulation, but further examination showed that she was still alive when Darren Smith had left her there. It turned out she was inhaling blood while she was unconscious, so they ruled her cause of death as drowning in her own blood. The couple that Sashita was living and working with were alarmed that morning when they discovered that her bed hadn't been slept in, so they called the police and reported her missing. It was then they had learned what had happened to her. Police were quick to learn where she had been the night before, and it didn't take them long to review the CCTV footage from Ritzy's. They saw on the tape that she had left with Smith. After he was arrested, Smith had claimed that he left the club alone when being interviewed by police. He was then charged with her murder. The boots that Darren was wearing were discovered at his friend's house. His friend let him borrow some clothes, as he didn't have any of his own. He put the bloodstained boots back there to try and get his friend to take the fall for the killing, as he was also at the club that night. The reason Smith didn't have any clothes was because it turned out that he was on weekend release from a prison sentence. He was 2 years into a 6-year sentence for a sex attack on another girl, and he had been released only hours before the murder. It is believed that given the heinous nature of the crime, the Luton Crown Court refused to have the trial there because of how the local people reacted to the killing. So the case was moved to the Old Bailey in London. Smith claimed he was innocent, but he showed no emotion as he was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment in December of 1995. He had been informed by the late 90s that he could see a release date as early as 2010, but he didn't know that he was being investigated further. DNA testing wasn't as effective back then, as only 2 laboratories existed in the UK that could test such samples, so they would have been under enormous pressure. By 1999, it was revealed that Smith had a long history of attacking girls that rejected his advances. He didn't know that his killing of Sashita had sped up the process of his DNA being tested against previous girls that had reported him. In late 1999, he was found guilty of sexual assault towards 2 schoolgirls in the late 80s in the Marsh Farm estate, one of which he threatened with a broken bowl. He was then handed a second life sentence and was told he would likely never be released from prison. As of 2024, I have no knowledge of Darren Smith's current status, but I can only hope he is still behind bars. I do want to take this time to acknowledge that a 20-year-old girl lost her life at the hands of a monster, and that she was unfortunately let down by the UK justice system, given that Darren Smith should not have been free to kill in the first place. Further investigations saw that his stepdad was also a murderer, killing Darren's mother and a love rival with a knife when Darren was just 15 years old. I have no idea if this could have had an impact on his mental state, but I would argue that he is too broken to ever walk with the public again, if that was the case. It's cases like these that make the public in favour of sending people to the gallows once again. However, capital punishment for this specific crime was abolished in the 1960s. Unfortunately, the public are quick to forget cases like these, but I see it as important to remember them, because you never know who could be moving in to a house near you.